Welcome to this week's God Squad Up Front. Here's where we discuss big issues and trending topics. If you're ready, so are we.
This week's guest is Dr. Bassem Naim, head of the Council of International Relations in Gaza and the former Palestinian Minister of Health. Dr. Naim has been vocal in his condemnations of the attacks of synagogues in Europe and the killing of innocent people, and most recently, the destruction of the Christian church by IDF soldiers in Gaza. He says that terrorism is a danger for all of us and that terrorism belongs to no religion or nation. Isn't this, to me, it's like psychological terrorism. You take a person's child because you don't like his father or because he threw a stone. You keep that child away from the parents. It's like psychological terrorism. You're going to make the parents want to leave. And then you don't permit a Muslim to go do his prayers, but the Israelis are allowed to go to the Wailing Wall as much as they want to. They are allowed to defile the masjid, and even when you go up the road to the masjid, you see the Israeli soldiers with the guns, and it's very intimidating to go there and pray.
I have to say two things. First of all, the Israelis living in the West Bank, in the settlements, they have a totally different streets. I mean, what you said that it took 20 minutes for the Israelis, yes, it took 20 minutes from Jerusalem to Ramallah, for example, because they have separated streets for them and guarded. The second point, yes, the Israelis using all these tools, demolishing of houses, executions, destroying farms, or wells, arresting young people, is to exercise the maximum pressure on Palestinians to leave. Because to repeat the genocides in the same manner they have done in 1948, it could be a little bit difficult. Therefore, they're repeating it, but on a slow manner. To make use of the time left, let us talk a little bit about Gaza. Gaza is a small strip. You are talking about 360 kilometers on the Mediterranean Sea. It is one of the most populated areas on Earth because you have within this small strip around 2.1 million citizens, which means around 5,500 to 6,000 inhabitants per 1 square kilometer. You can imagine this. What does it mean? We have, for example, 8 refugee camps here. I mean, the people who came from other Palestinian areas in 1948 and now living in Gaza Strip. For example, beach refugee camp, you have half a square kilometer with 90,000 Palestinians. Half a square kilometer with 90,000 Palestinians. You can imagine an apartment. We cannot describe it as an apartment. A very simple, poor walls with 20 members of the family living in this 50 square kilometers or something like that. Therefore, already Gaza is one of the biggest demographic problems for us Palestinians is a challenge. You have a very young generation. By the way, in Gaza Strip, around 55% of our people are below 16. And more than 70, around 70% are below 30, which means you are talking about a very young population, people full of energy, full of ambitions, full of dreams. They are looking for a better future. And these people, in 2006, they have participated in the Palestinian elections for the Palestinian Legislative Council. And at that time, Hamas as a movement won the election or won the majority. Therefore, Israelis, the Americans, United States, the administration, and later on the Europeans, they have rejected the results and imposed a boycott and siege on Gaza. It is executed by the Israelis, but supported by the United States at all levels.
And they imprisoned the winners. They imprisoned the winners.
Now you have 2 million people living in what's so-called, and this is not my description, this is the description of big legal figures at the international levels, some UN envoys for human rights, they are describing this as the biggest open-air prison. They are describing this as an animal farm. As I said before, earlier, they don't allow anything to enter Gaza without their license. And usually it is so complicated to get something in. Look, sometimes we didn't find soap or shampoos or very simple things. And when it comes to other needs, starting with the electricity. In 2006, they have attacked the Israelis by airplanes, the sole electricity generating company, which is, there is only one. They have destroyed nearly half of the company, of the facility. And therefore, since 2006, we get only 8 hours electricity per day. Otherwise, we don't have any electricity. And you can imagine in a very civilized Gaza Strip, and the people of Palestine are very civilized. We are not living in the desert. We are not, as some Israelis are trying to present us as very simple people who are Bedouins living on the deserts and riding camels. No, we are, the people here are very civilized like any other countries in Europe or everywhere. We are talking about electricity, internet, and all very complicated, sophisticated life. Anyway, you can imagine what does it mean? Only 8 hours, sometimes 5, sometimes 4, sometimes 2 hours electricity per day. You can imagine what does it mean for hospitals?
Exactly.
For universities and education. What does it mean for internet connections? I mean, electricity is the soul of a civilized life. You cannot really live today without electricity. And therefore, we have tried by all means to solve the problem, but we have failed because electricity is not something which is simple to generate. You need very big, complicated and sophisticated machines and generators. But you can imagine a director of a hospital to run a hospital every day, 16 to 18 hours without electricity. Okay, we are trying to use generators, but you cannot use it for 15 years.
No.
And we know, and we have documented cases of patients who died because of absence of electricity. And I know a very famous story where a very famous cardiac surgeon from Spain came to Gaza to help, and suddenly, after opening the heart, there was no electricity, and the pumping machine was out of function, shut off. And they have tried manually to continue pumping the blood until the generator worked again. And you can imagine what does it mean to work and to do health, or to run a health system with this very second water. Do you know that 95% of our water is undrinkable, is not consumable for human being? A lot of our water, which must come from the borders, unfortunately, is stolen by the Israelis. They have digged wells around the borders so that all the water which must come to our side is pumped out and taken to the Israeli side.
Yeah.
95% of our water is undrinkable. And I know as a Minister of Health how much was it difficult for us because of these very high ratios of salts in the water, that even any wash machine in a hospital, which usually might work for 20 years in America or somewhere else, after 2-3 years, it is out of function because of these very high salt. Even the sterilization techniques are not always functioning very well because of these high salty water. When it comes to the sea, the only chance of the people here to have a refreshment is to go to the sea, this short strip. 97%, all what I tell you is documented in the UN brochures. 97% of our sea water is not feasible for swimming because it is polluted, chemically polluted and biologically polluted. Why it is biological and chemically polluted? Because our sewage water, which must usually pumped to specific machines or filters to be filtered and recycled again. Because of absence of water, we cannot send to the filters or to these compounds, and therefore it is pumped directly into the sea. And you can sometimes, when you go to the sea, you will see children swimming in the sea, while beside them you can see a sewage water pumping into the water directly, into the sea water directly.
Is the fish edible? Is the fish edible?
I want to come to the fish. One of our sources, or one of our chances for some job opportunities is the sea, to go fishing. After very hard and complicated negotiations with the Israelis through the UN, they accepted from us to fish within 15 nautical miles. And this is very short area, by the way, if you're aware about this. But most of the time, for any reason, they say there are security reasons. You cannot go beyond 3 nautical miles or 5 nautical miles or 6, which means there is no chance to fish. And if you go beyond these borders, these restrictions, every week, every day, you will read in the newspaper or on WhatsApp or social media, a fisher has been shot, a fisher, his boat was confiscated, or the fisher was arrested and taken to Israel. Every day you have stories about fishers who either arrested or boats confiscated, or they were killed or wounded. And therefore, to get some fish, it is a very, very expensive and very, very, very serious issue. When it comes to education, as I said at the beginning, you have 55% of our people are below 16, which means nearly more than half of the Palestinians here are in schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and high schools. You can imagine what does it mean when you have more than half of the people in schools. At the same time, 85% of the Palestinian families are depending on international aid for food supply. Poverty rate is, for people who are living below the poverty line, are more than 80%. Unemployment rate between young people is around 60%. Generally, you are talking about 45%. Young people, around 60%. You can imagine what are the reflection of this very dire humanitarian situation on the people who have to go to school, to universities, their needs, their ambitions. I know some families, they go to school walking for long distances because they don't have 1 shekel, which is 25 cents maybe, to take a car or taxi. Even after graduation, most of the Palestinians in Gaza are not allowed to leave Gaza Strip. Therefore, we have a very ambitious, very young people full of life, full of ambitions, full of dreams, and they have sponsorships from everywhere. America, United Nations, from the United Nations, from Europe, but they lose their chances simply because they are not allowed to leave. Borders are closed. You can imagine if you apply for a license to cross through Erez, this is the Israeli military checkpoint, you have to wait weeks to get a response or a reply. And after weeks, it could be negative. And it could be not only negative, but they might say, okay, you have to come to us for interrogations in the crossing, and then we can decide yes or no. You can imagine how much of chances are lost when the people waiting, and they might not get at the end of weeks or months, and a lot of them are rejected totally, fully.
Are they represented? Are they represented by UN? Are they represented by UN observers? Do anyone go with them?
No. No, this is the problem. And a lot of them were asked to come for interrogation, and then they have been arrested. Anyway, you can imagine what does it mean for a young man or a young woman who have a sponsorship to study in Britain or in the United States or here or there, and suddenly he loses it because he cannot leave it. He can't leave Gaza Strip. And you can imagine what does it mean, this siege and closure for students who need electricity, who need internet, who need communication with other people. To go lastly to, before ending with the psychological impact, to go lastly to the health sector, you can imagine within this very difficult context, what does it mean to run a health system? No electricity, no water, most of the time no internet or good internet connections, poverty. 56 or 60% of our children are suffering of malnutrition or anemia. 42% of medical needs of the essential drug list accredited by the Ministry of Health, the stock is zero, no medicine. 42%, 62% of the laboratory needs stock is zero. Therefore, and at the by the way, to means 40% or 60% or anything zero, it could be effectively means that even the present or even the available items are also not effective, because sometimes when someone is a cancer patient and he have a program of 3 or 4 items, you have 1 or 2 and number 3 and 4 is not available. It means that even 1 and 2 are not useful. Even if they are available, they are not useful, because this is a scheduled program of 4 items, when to do this and when to do this. For example, Gaza have no chance for a radiotherapy. And most of the chemotherapy is not available. And if you have to have a radiotherapy sessions, you have to leave Gaza to the West Bank or sometimes to Israel. And therefore, some of the cancer patients waiting weeks to get a license for a radiotherapy session. And when you go back after 2 or 3 weeks to have a second one, you have to apply again and again. And you can imagine what does it mean, a cancer patient, an elderly man or elder woman, to go through all these complicated sufferings simply to have a radio session. I mean, and at the end, when the surgeon or the physician set up a plan, I mean, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and surgery, and this and this, he usually put a very strict plans. If one of these components is not available, all of this plan is useless. Therefore, I know a lot of cases who died while they were waiting for license, especially cancer patients. But what more serious and more dangerous and is really humiliating and very a blatant violation of human rights, that we have documented cases. And by the way, this is not only our documentation, even the Israeli human rights bodies documented cases where the sick patients, cancer patients, either they themselves or the person who are escorting them or accompanying them, they are asked, if you either to allow you to pass, you have to work with us as a collaborator against your people. If not, you will send me back. Simple. And we have a lot of cases documented. People are sent back. The other choice is to accept working with them as a collaborator against your own people. Sometimes the patient himself, and sometimes the man or the woman who is accompanying them. My nephew have to go for cardiac surgery. She was a child a few years ago, and we have asked them to allow someone to accompany her. She was maybe 6, 7 years old. They have rejected all the options, all the suggestions. Even my mother, which is at that time she was 70-something year old, she was rejected to accompany a child. And therefore, we have a lot of cases of children, 5, 6, 7, who went from Gaza to the West Bank, Jerusalem, or sometimes to Israel for bone marrow transplantation, for kidney transplantation, for cardiac surgery. I'm talking about very, very serious cases alone, without anyone who is accompanying them or escorting them. You can imagine your child to be in the hospital for cardiac surgery or kidney transplant or bone marrow transplant, and he's alone with nobody. What does it mean for him? And even for you, because this is a very serious surgery or a very serious procedure. He might die at any time during the surgery or before the surgery or after the surgery. And you don't have the chance to be beside him in this very difficult moments. Simply, they are refusing anyone to accompany him. And we have a lot of women and fathers and mothers who really were crying because they see their children leaving them because they have no choices. The other choice is to let them to die.
Right.
And this is, lastly, when it comes to the psychological effect, because we can talk hours about the very serious and dire situation here. Look, I'm sure if we have 2.1 million here in Gaza, we have 2.1 million citizens who are psychologically attacked or wounded or damaged. Men, women, elderly, children, because each one of us has something to suffer here or there. He himself, his son, his daughter, his father, his mother, he has, look, if you, I hope one of you can visit Gaza for one day, and you can imagine what does it mean to have drones. Do you know what does it mean, drones?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
24 hours above your head, scanning everything, 24 hours, 7 days a week. They don't leave the sky. And not only because of the seriousity of the information they get, it is also the noise. You can imagine what does it mean to have this noise 24 hours above your head. You can imagine what does it mean for children, this connection between drones and wars and aggressions. We have lost in the last aggression in 2014 more than 600 children and hundreds of women, peaceful, innocent children and women who did nothing. Simply, they were in a high building, attacked for some suspicions here or there. And they have destroyed 13 or 14 or 15 or something, 10 floors buildings, simply because they accuse someone to be living in this high building. While the people, I know a family here in the eastern of the city of Khan Yunis, 28 members were killed in one shot.
Oh my God.
The only one who left was an elderly man, 70 or 80 years old. The only one, because at that time he was accidentally out of the house. Only one. He said, I am becoming alone as if I am 80 years ago. The only one of the family was an elderly man, 80. They have killed all the family. And this is one of a lot of families. They were smashed from the civil register. Smashed. No one of the families left.
In a way, he's dead. I mean, he's old. In a way, they took his life too. There's nothing left.
Yes. But I mean, you can imagine what he cannot start a new life. He has no chance to have a new start. And therefore, when you talk about psychological impact of this siege and embargo on Gaza, it is really, really very serious on the long run.
Yes.
I told a lot of my friends abroad, I was sitting in front of the TV once, watching Al Jazeera, and they were interviewing someone from Istanbul. And my son, when the siege was imposed in Gaza, he was 6 years old, and now he is nearly 18. Sorry, he now nearly 18. Anyway, he asked me, Baba, this man, when they interview him, every time he has electricity in the background, he has lights in the background, because he cannot imagine that someone all the time he has electricity. The only thing he knows from life that electricity is only for a few hours. I mean, you can imagine how much this generation is damaged. They are creating a new narrow-minded people because they have no experience. What does it mean to drive a car for hundreds of kilometers without anyone to block you, or to have electricity 24 hours, or to this is something is not imaginable for them. And therefore you are creating a generation what we call the siege mentality. They are besieged mentally, not only physically when it comes to medicine or food or water. They are besieged mentally because they don't.
It's a concentration camp.
Yes, it is. By the way, some of the very famous legal experts, some of them are Jewish, and some of them who witnessed the concentration camps in the era of the Nazis, they have described Gaza as one of the biggest concentration camps. They have described as this. because this is the same thing. Arabs are not allowed to leave. Arabs have specific and limited things to get in or to. It is a new version of concentration camps.
Right.
And therefore, why to impose the siege? Simply because the people participated in the election of 2006 and they have used their right to choose their leadership. And at that time, Hamas won the election. Okay, if you have a problem with Hamas, you have to deal with this politically or any way. But why to punish collectively 2 million people because of their choice or because some of them have this choice? You are punishing 2 million people for 14 years now simply because of their choice of freedom. And therefore, we have, by the way, next May, maybe the second chance for election, and maybe we go again to, and we are really worried if Hamas won the election again. Is the international community ready to recognize and to respect the results, or they are going to impose a new siege again?
Is there any hope that the Biden administration will respect the decisions of the Palestinian people?
Look, based on our experience of 70 years, unfortunately, I don't think so. Because this strategic bond connection between the United States and Israel is beyond the details of disputes between Republicans and Democrats. Maybe you will see more kind words, fine, the tune of the language is maybe kind and a little bit mercy, but when it comes to strategic decisions, unfortunately, no. But again, look, Khalila, it is very simple. We have all the Palestinians accepted the two-state solution, and we have the 67 borders, and we have the UN resolutions. Okay, why not to oblige Israel to accept the international will and legitimacy? Why not to do the same thing what the Americans and the Europeans did in Kuwait in 1990 when Saddam Hussein occupied or invaded Kuwait? They have collected hundreds of thousands of soldiers to oblige him to leave Kuwait. Okay, we are not talking now about destroying Israel, but at least we are talking about the states in 67 borders. And we have a clear legitimacy, international rules and regulations and laws. Okay, why not to oblige Israel to respect the international law and to leave the 67 borders?
But
the second thing, Khalila, sorry, if we cannot solve the political problem, I mean the conflict between Israel and Palestinian, why must the Palestinians suffer a lot or so much at the humanitarian level? Why they are denied their
basic human
needs of food and medicine and water? Okay, political solutions, it might take another 10, 20, 50 years, but it doesn't mean that these people have to suffer until we solve the very complicated or the bigger issues. But when it comes to the bigger issues, I think it is simple. Palestinians accepted, despite we have sacrificed 78% of our land, they have accepted a two-state solution with East Jerusalem as a capital and respecting the right of Palestinians to return. And okay, why not the international community can, if they are supporting the solution as a strategic option to solve the problem, to oblige Israel to accept this and to leave